Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Greater Arden Chamber's second community briefing. I am Elizabeth Graham, the board president of the Greater Arden Chamber, and I will be moderating this event this evening. I would first like to thank our members and all of their support as we continue to advocate and support for our community. Second, a special thank you to Athena Salazar with Life to Design Business Coaching for all of her behind the scenes on everything techie to get us going this evening. Also, a quick thank you to John Hoffman with CCAN and Rich Desmond for working on putting this event together. And last but not least, I would like to introduce our Sheriff's Department, Captain James Barnes. Thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge with us today. Real quick, if you guys have a question, you will have an opportunity to post those in our chat. You will see that on the settings section of your of the chat, or the webinar here. So go ahead and have any of those questions, and we will be asking those to the group after Mr. Barnes gives his presentation. So here we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Elizabeth and Athena for putting this together and everybody that's been part of this. I do want to give an early disclaimer. As we came on, it looks like I might be having some technical issues, might be user error, but sometimes my camera goes out, but my audio will be here so I can still connect with you. We're going to hope it stays up and going. But again, to the Greater Arden Chamber for allowing me to connect with you, especially in these interesting times that we have as we come out of the pandemic and just came through the civil unrest and everything that we're learning from all of this together. So I want to thank everybody that's taken the time to come online. The ones who submitted questions ahead of time, thank you. I look forward to answering those questions. And again, just to echo, if there's additional questions that we have time to get to, please put it in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer to the best of my ability. So as there might be new people here, we did this once before. My name is Captain James Barnes. I became the commander here right in the middle of the pandemic. I would say about a little over a month ago, and then obviously with what we just experienced in our community the past almost 2 weeks now. But there was a lot of things that happened, and I just kind of want to touch on what we have been doing. As law enforcement professionals, I will tell you my message to my team, from the sheriff obviously down through all of us, is, you know, when the community's expectations change, we need to change. We need to really take a hard look at what can we do to provide a better service. It makes no mistake that we are all sickened by the video we saw in Minneapolis. The anger a lot of us in law enforcement had towards that, as we know that does not reflect a great majority of the law enforcement professionals around the nation, but also being sympathetic to the communities in which this impacts. And so I want you to know that we're here for you. I'm excited to say when there's events like this in the pandemic, there's ways for us to look how we can become better as a community. And you look at the word community, what does that mean? You know, I remember growing up, it was important that we knew our neighbors, we knew the phone numbers to our neighbors, and when people were having, troubles or challenges, we all came together to help each other out. Now we live in times where very few people know who your neighbors are and good phone numbers and communicate with them, and businesses alike. I always challenge wherever I work that the businesses work together and know the next door neighbor and businesses around them so we can constantly show the support. I think in times of tragedy, we do a great job coming together and figuring out better ways to do not just business, but as human beings moving forward. So I think there's some opportunity here. If I could just address some of the questions that came in ahead of time, and then I'd be more than happy to answer any other questions, because I don't want this to be a one-sided conversation. I'd prefer that we both be able to engage here, and I can answer the questions that come through. So a question that came in is like, is there any good news out of all this? I think I touched real briefly on that. Where I think there's good news is you've seen a community come together where I've had many officers come in my office, talk about how this has greatly impacted them, how they can voice that, they don't share the same mindset as what happened in Minneapolis, and we don't do that. And I said, our actions are going to speak louder than words right now. Is just continue to be proud you work in a noble profession. And your calling in life, and a higher calling in life, is to serve our community. So, listen. And I tell the officers, there's a difference between pride and humility. having the pride to sit there and say, as a law enforcement professional, that's not us. We don't conduct our way. Our way is not like what happened in Minneapolis. But to have the humility to listen and understand and help, community members help us understand, what do you want when we talk about change and change how we do it, and getting clear paths moving forward, I think is going to help provide a better service. So the positive news on that, the good news is, yeah, we're coming together as a community. A lot of officers have come in here, and I will say have shed tears based off of what has gone on in the nation, but also because members of the community stopped them on the way to get either coffee or something to eat and thanked them or prayed for them. And it's a very, it's a humbling moment, but I will tell you, we're in the business of helping human beings, and we have human beings providing that service. So the more we can come together and move forward through this is absolutely what we need to do. So that's the good news. I think that's what we have going forward. And also we get to learn from some things that we can do better, and start those practices. Another one question came as a great question about businesses. What are we doing to protect businesses during these times? As you're all familiar, and you probably watched the news coverage and I'm sorry, my days are running together, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, on a Sunday, we were monitoring nationwide what was happening. And when we came into work on Sunday morning and started monitoring what was going on the East Coast, we saw the havoc that was going on in the communities, the looting, the rioting. And we felt if that's hitting there, then we watched Chicago, and it happened in Chicago. Then it happened in Colorado. We figured it's coming. So what I did is I already have routinely Zoom meetings with the PBID leaders, and I reached out to the PBIDs and said, we need to get on a meeting. I need to give you some information. And so as we got on that meeting, I said, this is not a scare tactic, but we need to be very vigilant and watching for our businesses. There are some safety precautions. If they see groups of people coming or congregating, they might want to shut their business. And I will tell you, without an exact number, Sunday night at about 11:30, when the live news feed from the media stopped on TV, within about a half hour, we had roughly 18 business burglaries that were subject to not only break-ins but lootings. Thankfully, no fires are burning down. And so we had to learn from that, right? A lot of our attention was downtown with what was going on down there. And then we had to refocus our attention, obviously, in our own communities. Our teams did a great job working together and continued to meet with businesses the following day and help the cleanup efforts of that. But we also started working with our intelligence groups about it seemed like a planned and coordinated event. And the businesses that were hit first, and how quick it was within a short amount of time, so many businesses. We learned that people who did this had what they call scout vehicles, that they actually kind of drove through an area and making sure there's no police presence or no owners at the business. And then a group of cars would come in behind. So as far as information that we gathered, we started watching that and we started reacting differently. And there was less and less impact throughout the week regarding businesses. So I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to be proactive on keeping the businesses safe, informing them on what some of the best practices were. Again, having some of the PBIDs coming together and support one another was really important. It was great to see. As far as someone mentioned, I believe, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to read from the notes here, that there were people attempting to call the sheriff's office during the past 2 weeks, and they don't seem to be getting a response. Remember, we are still in the middle of a pandemic. Some offices within the sheriff's office are working remotely, so it may not be as responsive. But we are getting back. We're starting, I believe, a return to work protocols that we have. Protocols and coming back to work and making sure that we continue to be safe. We want to open our service centers for all of our all the members of our community. So we're truly working to get back. I don't want to say normal, but just get back to doing business and let our communities thrive. Another way to contact the sheriff's office if you think they're more of a nuisance issue is through, obviously, if you go to our website, there's an opportunity to submit a tip. Those are tracked every day by our intel group. And so we will look at those. If there was a question that came up about, sounds like maybe fireworks are going off at a certain time or night, and they don't want to burden, the dispatchers, I would say, by calling in, or do they want to call the non-emergency line? I would ask, if you want to submit a tip, give the date, time, and the location and the regularness of that, and then we can have our problem-oriented policing officers be out and about during those times, that we can help identify where that's happening. So With that, I kind of highlighted a couple questions. One big question that keeps coming up and I want to touch on, and then hopefully we'll turn it back over to you, Elizabeth, to ask me any additional questions, is the homeless issues, people experiencing homeless right now. It does seem to be growing, but as you know, the community health director had put out a public health order that encouraged law enforcement and all services not to remove and or have people move that people are experiencing homelessness. So if they're in a vehicle, we've been asked to kind of leave them in place. The challenging thing for us, and we're working through that, is there was a specific language in that public health order that did not allow us to cite and or ask people to move. There was no clear direction regarding public versus private property. So we are working through that. We've been informed a new public health order will be coming out Friday, so that'll allow our homeless outreach team to be able to get out into the communities again and help. But if by any means we're still taking the information, if you have areas that are becoming severely impacted, please reach out to us, and we'll continue to take note of those locations. And we're able to get out and help those ones experiencing homeless. We'll get out there and do that. So. I've talked quite a bit. I would say it's roughly for 12 minutes, and I apologize. I would love to answer any questions. So, Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I'd like to turn it back to you and ask any other additional questions that might have come in.
Yep, you got it. It looks as though the homeless subject is definitely of concern in our community. I'm going to read you this question. While working with the homeless, I'm seeking resources to give them for housing at this point. Is anyone in Sacramento going to provide some resources for those that are marginally housed at this time, especially those in domestic violence or trafficking situations?
That's a great question. If it's more of the homeless or people that are just on the cusp with limited housing, I would contact our homeless outreach team. They're in connection with a lot of resources that are county that they can actually have phone numbers of people pick up a phone any day, time or night. So I think that's important. I know Sacramento Steps Forward and other areas that are within the community that you can reach out to. And again, once we know the full challenge that's happening with that individual or individuals, then we can give them the right resource to steer them towards.
All right, so it was a very similar question, and I'll also read this directly from the chat. Captain Greg Fishman, so this is a question directly from Greg Fishman. Good to see you again. I'm wondering what you think about expanding the role of mental health professionals and social workers to work with law enforcement when there are homeless and mental health calls. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, hello, Greg. Thanks for the question. And we already have that within the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office and other agencies, where we have a mental health clinician who actually rides with one of our officers that are dedicated to identifying someone who may be experiencing mental health or going through a crisis. Unfortunately, the calls don't always come in with someone who might be experiencing that. So they will go through what we call our computer CAD to look at calls. If it came out as maybe a disturbance call, it would turn into, and looking at some of the language that's in there, they would respond to that. The best part about having a clinician there, obviously, they may have a more trusting experience with the clinician. The officer will stand back more from a safety standpoint. And then if there's follow-up work, we do have peer navigators that work with the clinicians, will do and connect them to the resources and just ensure that they're getting the service that they need. Same thing with the homeless outreach team. The clinicians will, we call them our CAT, and they will go out with the officers and actually respond to homeless encampments if need be to help connect people with resources. A lot of the challenge on the homeless side of it is there are several that are service resistant, and it's difficult for us to get them to those services. Nonetheless, we are actually keeping track of how many times have we contacted them, what were they responsive to this time that they weren't before. And so from that point, how do we continue those efforts and get them connected to services? So great question. That's a problem that is ever challenging, right? These are, you can't arrest your way out of those problems, and those will create bigger problems. So how do we continue to build that base? A lot of that funding is based off of grants, and unfortunately, with counties and other agencies that get grants, those have a time lapse to it. So they may have funding for 2 years, but there may be no way to sustain it. So I know as a sheriff's office, we look at those, we want to say something we can be able, or find not only a grant, but how we can sustain it moving forward. So that's a great question.
Yes, thank you so much, Greg. This is an interesting question. And I think on top of the question, they want to know what is a PBID, and that's a great question. But maybe you can also tell us as a community where the PBIDs are in our area.
Okay, that is I don't know exactly, and I should know that, but being here a month, I'm learning real quickly. I know we have them in the Watt corridor, Fulton corridor, and so to say the boundary, I don't have that off the top of my head. I do apologize. See, I thought I'd have the answer for everything. I don't have one for that. But it's a property-based improvement district is what a PBID stands for. And what that is obviously businesses will come together. Usually there's a fee associated with being part of that, and you approach issues or challenges together and collectively. Sometimes the PBIDs can offer up additional funding for lighting if there's landscaping challenges and or to maybe beautify your property a little bit, and that they come together. So there's a lot of benefits to that. Some PBIDs will have dedicated security that are actually patrolling the area, so it'll help enhance that as well. But having our PBID partners has been very beneficial, because what I have learned is I like to think I was an investigator for many years, that I knew everything, but when it comes to technology, I don't. And in one of the PBID meetings, I was educated real quickly on the app of Snapchat and how you can follow certain people's in areas and chat. So that helped us also in the north areas. We started monitoring areas that maybe became a hot spot, monitor that chatter if it was peaceful or if it looked like they were going to be, so to speak, if they had ill intention. So again, we learned from the community, and I was glad that they spoke up on that.
Yeah, I've been very grateful that our community has PBID. So thank you for answering that for our members. Let me see. We've had quite a few questions come in, so I'm going to scroll back up real quick and make sure I'm not missing any. Apparently, there's been some issue in our neighborhoods where we have particular individuals that might be not using restrooms that are appropriate. How is the best way for either a community resident or a business owner to kind of rectify that problem?
Well, that's a tough answer, right? I mean, when you think of what facilities do you have around, especially if we're talking about a park, or if we're talking maybe a strip mall with a business, if an individual has the desire and is just thinking this is where I'm going to utilize a restroom, it's tough to stop that. We've talked with businesses on how do you get people, maybe not people, but you get rid of maybe exterior plugs, right? If you have Wi-Fi, to be able to shut the Wi-Fi or put a secure so people can't sit in front of the building and utilize that. That's a tough answer to that, because again, that comes down to an individual mindset where someone feels that this is the best place to conduct that.
Is that something?
I think you lost I'm still here if you can hear me. I think I lost my video.
Okay, I hear you. Can you hear me? Sorry, I'm hoping
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So is that something that they would use the non-emergency call line for if they're seeing something like that on a regular basis, or the individual? Is that the number that they would use to call?
Yeah, I would say the non-emergency line would be the best way. The main reason is obviously we don't know who would be doing business like that, right? I don't know if it's someone who maybe is experiencing homeless and they have no other options. But yeah, if it's a homeless, call the non-emergency line. They'll connect you with the homeless outreach team, and they'll be able to do some follow-up, especially if it's someone that's known to them. There's a lot of good dialogue with those who are experiencing homeless and our homeless outreach team. Some will just flat out say, I'm not looking. There you go. I see everybody again. They're not interested in services, but they're willing to engage in dialogue where we can say, can you please, refrain from doing certain things? And we do get compliance that way.
And what is that non-emergency number just for our group?
It is area code 916-874-5115. Or you could go onto our website and do submit a tip, especially if it's an ongoing problem. That is something that would be forwarded to homeless outreach team or a problem-oriented policing team.
Perfect. Thank you. I have a rather large question, so I'm just going to go ahead at it. Officers per 1,000 is a means of understanding the level of public safety provided. Do you happen to know how many officers per 1,000 we currently have in the Arden Arcade area?
I don't. That is something that I can get and report back to you, and you can put that out maybe to the listeners and or on the Facebook page.
Okay.
But that is something I can do that. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Perfect. That would be great. Thank you. Similar to your comment about groups of criminals banding together to vandalize businesses, recently a neighbor's house was broken into and things were stolen. According to the neighbor who witnessed the entire episode, and apparently there were trucks and SUVs, and they had scoped the scene prior to that. What kind of crackdown measures are occurring to break down criminal rings of this sort?
Well, that's a great question. I would say if we can use 4,000, then we can stop a lot of it, right? Technology has really put a challenge for law enforcement. That's what we really experienced this past couple of weeks. There's many different platforms that people are using to communicate that are not obviously matters of public that we can see. So we usually don't know until after the fact. Again, some of the people that came into this area over that weekend where there was a large series of burglaries were not even from the area. We had people from Central Valley. We had some people from out of the state that when we actually caught them. So it was interesting to see why they came to Sacramento and what did that. So the best thing we can do is we would ask is be vigilant. If we know a lot of families and businesses have technology as far as cameras and Ring, you can get onto our website and be part of the Sheriff's Electronic Eye. And if I can just talk about that, that does not mean we can patch into your system and see what's going on around your home. What that is something you can register. And then what would happen is if there's maybe a crime in the area, we have a way to check everybody that's registered that I do have cameras. I'm willing to let you see, any footage that you may need. And so if we had a direction of travel and or it might have captured some of the incident itself, we can actually go contact that homeowner and or business and look at the video footage, which can help us catch them in the end. So the technology side is ever advancing, and I feel I'm 20 light years behind it. But the best part is I got young officers who are brilliant on it, and I usually pull them in my office and say, teach me how to use this. And that's how we're trying to catch up.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually answers a question on if you guys are using Ring videos to help, and it sounds like that is definitely a resource for you. So that's great for all of us that have that. I'm going to skip down just really quick. So I'll read again verbatim to this. Thanks for taking the time to provide another briefing. So thank you for that. Can you please explain, and this is a good question, I've had this question myself. Can you explain the jurisdictional responsibilities of the Sheriff Department and CHP in Arden Arcade and how that differs from the city of Sacramento?
Yes, that's a great question. You think because we're all driving in emergency vehicles that we would all respond to certain calls for service the same way. In unincorporated area of the Sheriff's Office right now, we have a partnership with obviously all allied agencies, but anything that is traffic specific related, car crashes, vehicle versus pedestrians, that would typically be dispatched to the Highway Patrol. You may have seen where the Sheriff's Office heard it come out, was the first one to respond, and the Highway Patrol may come in behind and they would take the lead on the investigation. Now in the city of Sacramento, there's no need to have the Highway Patrol come in because they're all traffic trained. They will handle their own traffic incidents and follow up. But they also provide the service as it calls for service to areas in the city. And it's quite tricky because sometimes if you have a county sign on one side of the road and then you have a city sign on another side of the road, it can become very confusing to a citizen who calls in because all you're really saying is, I just need help, right? And you figure out who has to do it. But at the same time, that really is the big differential business. California Highway Patrol will provide more traffic safety and awareness.
Yeah, that is a little confusing sometimes for us residents. An attachment to that, do you happen to know what you think the Arden Arcade gets as far as services financially? Like how much is spent, do you think, in the Arden Arcade area from the sheriff?
Yeah, I don't know the actual number. I know that anybody north, what I call north of the river, for the county side of it, anybody calls a non-emergency line, we respond. Sometimes based off call volume. For example, before I came on this call, I looked and there's over 35 calls waiting to be responded to, with roughly 24 officers heading out there. So we're always trying to play catch up, especially as the temperature gets warmer. We have people that are out of school now with not able to go places. So there's some calls that are generated based off of just kids being kids, and so they go based on a priority basis. But as far as how much money is spent, I don't have that number. But I will tell you that anybody that calls, we have a duty to respond.
Thank you. I'm going to I know I don't want to miss any, so let me just go before. I know we have a few more minutes with you. And so I want to make sure that we got all the questions answered. Oh, here's one that I did miss. And this is kind of what we had a little bit talked about on our last briefing. So I know it will be something that you've already answered, but on the impact with the Minnesota and the George Floyd situation, what kind of impact resulted from that outside of not just the protesting, but what other impacts were that on the sheriff's department?
Well, this is a tough one because, when you ask, as I mentioned before, we have human beings providing a service for other human beings. And I worked homicide for 4 years. I was a supervisor for 3 years, an investigator for 1. And I will tell you what I saw in that time there. You don't just leave it at work. Right? We come home, we have to fill our gas tanks. We have to stop at the store and get groceries and sit down at the dinner table. And when your loved ones say, "How was your day?" it's not the topic you want to really bring up. Right? And so from an emotional standpoint, but I'm also, as I say that, it's a heavy heart on the other side of what Mr. Floyd's family's facing, right? And our community's facing. And unfortunately, I see a lot of divide and people forcing to take sides. And it comes down to, I'm a faith-driven man, and it comes down to doing the right thing for the human being. And we have laws that we have to adhere to and abide by. But I will tell you, this has hit emotionally people in law enforcement, because you want to speak out and say, that's not us. But have the humility, as I said early on, to say, help me understand what we need to do moving forward. And we're committed to doing that. A saying that I've some of my iconic figures throughout my career have said, and I've been around and I've heard, is you will hear young officers sometimes, because they went through a very stressful academy and they're now on the job, and they say, I've earned my badge. And the reality is the community entrusts you with that badge, and you earn it the day you retire. And so that is the mission here, not only with the sheriff's office, but all law enforcement. And it's tough because this took a toll on everybody going home. But having real talks too, of being open and saying, let's get to a root problem. Let's not just talk about it because this is national news. The hard work is when the noise is silenced and we're 3 months down the road. And how do we continue to build those bridges, build those blocks to get together to actually make change and just quit talking about it? So I'm absolutely dedicated to the community we serve here, especially in the north area in Arden Arcade. My team here will respond. It doesn't matter who calls, and we will come, and that's what we do. So we're here to serve our community. We're proud of it. We're proud of the profession because we know we don't have the officers that you see in Minneapolis. And if I can ask anything of everybody that's on this call, if you see a law enforcement officer, to say thank you right now, because there's some healing that needs to go internally as well there. And conversely, we're trying to reach out to the businesses and the community, let them know that actions speak louder than words. What you saw in Minneapolis is not what's something you see here. We don't train that way. We don't do it. And every one of us have been angered when we saw that, because look what it's done to not only this community, the state, but this nation.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. We've come to the end of our time. I do want to remind everybody that our last briefing with Captain Barnes was last week, that you can find that on the Greater Arden Chamber Facebook page. And it is a recording. This one, in addition, has been recorded, and you can find that if you have any questions. Captain Barnes, you've been amazing and such a great resource, not just for our community, but for our county. So thank you for all the time and really making this a personal conversation. I think it's a true benefit to what we're trying to do, not just as a chamber, but as a community member. So thank you again for your time. If just to the group, if anybody has additional questions, you can definitely leave those on our Facebook page and we will forward those to the captain. And we hope that through the next coming weeks, we will be able to have an opportunity to do this again. So thank you very much. And everybody have a great evening and be safe out there. Thank you.
All right, take care.